Welcome to CardioCast for Friday, October the 18th. I'm Dr. Jim Dwyer. Before the news, I wanted to mention that another MD Edge Card Talk with the Dwyer brothers follows today's regular news segment. In today's Card Talk, my younger cardiologist brother Jerry introduces us to a truly amazing augmented reality approach to the clinical practice of electrophysiology. And we have the help of some very special guests. In this week's news, statin use may increase the risk of skin and soft tissue infections. Rivaroxaban may not be the right choice for patients with thrombotic antiphospholipid syndrome. And the feds may ease anti-kickback laws to smooth your path to value-based care payments. Statin use for a minimum of 3 months was significantly associated with a greater risk of skin and soft tissue infections. That's according to an analysis by researchers at Curtin University in Perth, Australia. They reviewed prescription claims from more than 228,000 people over a 10-year period. The study authors note that the literature on statins and SSTI or diabetes risk is conflicted. Some studies show reduced risk with statin use. Others indicate ties to new-onset diabetes. The investigators found that statin use for as little as 91 days and for up to a year was linked with significantly elevated risk of SSTIs. Statins were also associated with a significantly increased risk of new-onset diabetes. That increased risk of infection was seen in patients who did and did not develop diabetes. Given the findings, the researchers say clinicians should monitor blood glucose levels in statin users who are predisposed to diabetes, and be aware of statin users' possible increased risk of skin and soft tissue infections. The findings appear in the British Journal of Clinical Pharmacology. Patients with thrombotic antiphospholipid syndrome, or APS, may face a greater risk of recurrent thrombosis when taking Rivaroxaban instead of a vitamin K antagonist. That's the key finding from a study by researchers at Vall d'Hebron University Hospital Research Institute in Barcelona. They performed an open-label, Phase 3 trial of 190 patients with thrombotic APS. Patients were randomized to either Rivaroxaban or vitamin K antagonists. After 3 years of follow-up, almost twice as many patients in the Rivaroxaban group had experienced recurrent thrombosis at nearly 12%, versus 6% in the vitamin K antagonist group. That finding was not significant, however. Stroke was more common among Rivaroxaban patients, while major bleeding was slightly less common with Rivaroxaban. The findings appear in the Annals of Internal Medicine. We'll be right back after this message. And finally, federal health officials want to update the Stark Physician Self-Referral Law and the federal anti-kickback statute to encourage more doctors to embrace value-based care arrangements. The long-awaited reforms would create permanent exemptions and safe harbors to protect doctors participating in legitimate value-based arrangements. Donna Thiel is a Washington-based health law attorney. She says the Stark Law has been an unintentional roadblock to value-based programs, in part because it restricted the exchange of rewards for good behavior. Ms. Thiel says that if finalized, the new regs would remove some barriers to hospital physician and other arrangements designed to enhance care coordination, improve quality, and reduce waste. There are 2 proposed measures. Both would create safe harbors for certain payments in a value-based arrangement that fosters better coordinated and managed patient care. And they would protect certain tools and supports shared or delivered under patient engagement and support arrangements. For example, a specialty physician practice could share data analytics services with a primary care physician practice to coordinate care and better manage shared patients. For a more in-depth look at the proposed Stark Law changes, click the link in the podcast notes. You can find these stories and more by visiting www.mdedge.com/cardiology or by clicking the links in the podcast notes. This week's contributors include Will Pass, Heidi Spleet, and Alicia Gallegos, and CardioCast Cardiology News and MD Edge Cardiology are edited by Catherine Hackett. And now, stay tuned for Card Talk. Welcome to MD Edge Card Talk with the Dwyer brothers. I'm Dr. Jim Dwyer.
And I'm Dr. Jerry Dwyer.
Are you excited to be here or what, Jerry? Come on.
I'm very excited about today's topic. So why don't we just go ahead and get started. I have the pleasure to introduce a good friend, Dr. Jennifer Silva, who is a pediatric electrophysiologist at St. Louis Children's Hospital in St. Louis, Missouri. And she's the chief medical officer of the company that we're going to learn about today, SentiAR. And also on this podcast, we have Berk Tas, who is the CEO of SentiAR. They're going to be talking about SentiAR, which developed a proprietary engine that displays real-time 3D patient-specific holographic images of heart anatomies with real-time catheter locations during minimally invasive catheter-based cardiac electrophysiology, or commonly known as EP procedures. Using an augmented reality head-mounted display, the Microsoft HoloLens, the SentiAR system empowers physicians by improving visualization and providing a sterile interface for physicians to manipulate the data and enhance their understanding of the case. Future interactions of the SentiAR system will further improve connectivity and provide computational decision support with the goal of improving patient outcomes. I had the pleasure of first seeing this technology back in mid-2016, and I have to tell you, Brother Jim, I fell in love with it. So I'm excited, and at this time, to have both of our guests introduce themselves. Dr. Jen.
Thanks for having me. My name is Jennifer Silva. As Dr. Dwyer mentioned, I am a practicing pediatric electrophysiologist here in St. Louis at Washington University and St. Louis Children's Hospital. I've been practicing now for 10 years. It's hard to believe. It feels like it's flown by. But I feel like the most exciting pieces of my career have evolved around emerging technologies and novel technologies and applying those to unique populations. And in my particular case, that's pediatrics. I had the really good sense over 10 years ago to marry Jonathan Silva, who is a biomedical engineer here at Washington University and also studies computational approaches to cardiac electrophysiology. And so we spend a lot of time at home talking about how we can make this field better. And this was our brainchild. We sort of thought, here's a way we could do this better. And here we are a few years later. We're excited to talk about it today.
Now, you spent a couple of years in biomed engineering too yourself, didn't you?
I did. As a fellow, I worked in Dr. Yoram Rudy's laboratory here at Washington University on a technology that was the core technology of another company called CardioInsight, which was eventually acquired by Medtronic. That technology was doing non-invasive mapping to create electrical maps of the heart using a vest.
Cool.
So we met in the lab.
Sounds like there was electrical something or other happening.
Now, as I said, I had the pleasure to head to New York with Doctors Jen and John in 2016. And they are two of the brightest folks in this space. And John was not able to be with us today, but the technology that they have developed has just continued to grow every year. I'd like to take a minute and ask CEO of SentiAR, Berk Tas, to introduce himself as well and let us know where we are in the whole company.
Sure. Thank you for that, Dr. Dwyer. My name is Berk Tas. I came up through engineering. I'm trained as an electrical engineering and physics major. I immigrated to this country and got my citizenship in 2013. So it was a bit of a windy path for me to end up here.
Yeah, let me ask for the listeners, SentiAR. I think that was a name from Jen and John. So I'm going to ask Jen, how did you arrive at that name?
So as you well know, we went through many names. We were really trying to figure out who we were and what could we call ourselves that would help with what we do. So to take a step back for a second, and to reiterate what you mentioned in the early introduction, what we're creating is a system to help cardiac electrophysiologists through their procedures. And our entry point into this is to create these holograms. And these holograms are patient-specific holograms of the hearts and the catheter locations within those holograms. It's a really unique experience, as you yourself experienced when you first put it on.
Absolutely.
You feeling of course this is how we should be looking at it, right? Why am I looking at things on screens? Why am I looking at 3D data compressed onto a flat screen when we now have the technology to really display it as it is in 3 dimensions? And so as we were looking for our names, what to call ourselves, as you know, John was born in Mexico City, and Spanish is spoken around our house. And so the verb to feel in Spanish is sentir. But we are in fact an augmented reality company, and so we put those two things together and we came up with SentiAR.
That's cool.
That is very cool. Jen, you keep, I hope that's okay instead of Dr. Jen, right? Jen, what is the difference between virtual reality, augmented reality, and the term mixed reality that you have been alluding to?
I think that's really important. And I think the reason it's important to understand the differences between these technologies, to understand the differences, to understand why we are able to do what we do now. The fact of the matter is virtual reality has been around for decades, right? And it was this technology that was going to change the way we experienced things. It was going to change the way we watched movies and engaged in entertainment. It was going to change the way we built things. But it never pervaded the medical space. And the reason it probably never pervaded the medical space is that the technology was limited in that it's a completely immersive event. When you put on a virtual reality headset, when we do that at home as we're playing games with our children, I can't see what's happening around me. So I trip over my couch, I trip over my table, but I can't see that in my environment. Because of that, it was never really going to be clinically tractable. What we know is that when augmented reality came on the scene, and so those are things like Google Glass, right? So you can see through it and you can still see your native environment and then just pull these 3-dimensional or digital images into your natural environment. That's when things got interesting. So for those of us who sort of tinker in this emerging reality space, said, this is now the first time we think that this could be clinically viable. And what we saw were people starting to write up their clinical experiences. They tended to be one case, so a case report or something like that, using these technologies. And what people reported really early on was that they understood anatomy better. They just felt like they could see things better. What mixed reality is building off of augmented reality. So you still remain in your natural environment and you can import these digital images, but now you can interact with them. You can manipulate them. You can turn them leftward, rightward, you can zoom it in, decrease the size of the geometry, whatever you'd like to do, so you can understand it better. So when we saw mixed reality, when we just heard about it, we knew that this was the moment we were ready to jump in. And quite frankly, the technology wasn't even available at that time. Our initial development was on virtual reality headsets. But
I remember.
Yes, yes, you do. But what it helped us do was position ourselves to be really early movers as soon as the hardware technology became available.
So tell me, the kind of the least knowledgeable of the group here today, how do you create this? It's a combination of, is it CT, MRI, put together with real-time fluoroscopy, seeing the position of the EP wires, catheters?
So similar to what you're describing, we take imaging that we create, and electrophysiology is a little bit unique because we're looking at more than just the structure of the heart. So providing a CT scan or an MRI for us isn't going to be sufficient. What we need to be able to see are these electrical maps that we generate. These electrical maps are created on commercially available systems. And so what we do is we take those electrical maps and we display those compressed maps in true 3 dimensions. And so what you get is this hologram of whatever chamber you're creating. It may be multiple chambers. It might be limited to just if you're, for instance, in the right atrium, it might just be that. Whatever the chambers are that you're in. And within there, you can see the catheters and you see the electrical map overlaid onto that geometry.
Cool. So this is a combination of what you create with the maps and then real time seeing the catheters, moving the catheters.
Correct. And that for us was really important. We wanted to do something hard, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
I started with Frank Netter's pictures of drawings of the heart. Going from those years ago is all we had, that was my virtual reality, and trying to translate that into something 3-dimensional.
Well, and so, and that's how the field has exploded. So let's take that as a really great example. What we know is that, for instance, the group at the Cleveland Clinic has said, it seems like we can educate our medical students better than, as it turns out, Netter and a cadaver. And so what they've done is
that's what it was. Yeah, Netter and a cadaver. Yep.
That's what it was, right? That's how what they've done is create an entire holographic cadaver. And
wow.
what they are teaching students, and I believe they've showed data on this. And they showed us the data. I'm not sure if it's been published yet. But what they've shown is that students who learn in standard methods, using a cadaver plus Netter, versus also having exposure to the holographic cadaver, that they learn faster and learn better.
I can believe it. Our cadaver was 350 pounds. It was a chore.
Right? It's hard to make sense of what's what.
Yeah.
That's true in all of learning in medical schools right now. This type of augmented learning and using other things other than just the traditional chalkboard has really emerged. That's what we're looking at. 360 classrooms is what we're calling it now.
And so to piggyback on that, what we see is this technology improving visualization, but that being the lowest lying fruit. We think that there's a lot more that can be done on top of the holographic visualization.
And is that where this data management platform work comes into, and how that feeds into this? And
that's right.
Kind of, you talked about data activation. So that's what you're alluding to, Jennifer?
That's right. And so
somebody educate me.
Yes, please educate my brother.
Yeah, so Jen created a perfect segue here.
Way to go, Jen. Hey!
That's right. You just lean forward and it starts going. That's basically what she's done. So data activation in its simplest format is turning data into information. Data in its definition is unorganized, and it's actually everything. Thoughts, objects, as described in verbal language or written. And when you turn data into information, you activate it. Now, there's many ways to do a better job in activating than average. One way, and as Jen articulated very well, we've taken a 3D image that was being presented in a 2D monitor, and we activated that and turned that into a 3D information. So we've elevated that activation in that particular case. But there's other sources of data in that room. The electrophysiology room is a very technology-rich environment. Part of the reason is there's nothing you can see with the naked eye. In fact, the patient is entirely covered. Jen doesn't even see the patient. You're just operating in a keyhole. And all the information you're operating on is coming through instrumentation. And they're all sources of data. You get electrograms, you get pacing information when you're trying to regenerate the particular arrhythmia with wires inside the heart. You obviously get the images. And all of this currently is just being fed to the physician in its most basic format, in an unorganized fashion. It's not contextual and it's not activated. So what we envision the future, what you can do when you're wearing a computer, is turn these sources of data into an organized source of information and present at the right time.
Do you see this, the visual holograms that you're using now, do you see that intertwining with the computer you're wearing to voice commands like, say, hey, Alexa, just tell me what the blood pressure is, or tell me something or other? Is that part of where you're heading, I presume?
Yeah, so we envision a command center where a physician is connected to the virtual world where the sources of this information is, and pulls out the contextual data they want to see at the time through verbal commands like you illustrated. Hey, Alexa, hey, SentiAR, what is the blood pressure?
Okay, SentiAR, sorry.
Right,
SentiAR.
or use gestures, move things around, zoom in, zoom out, and get decision support through community intelligence. That's another thing a computer can do, is provide intelligence that is coming from a community of physicians and past procedures, and provide some guidance on a pattern that is easier for a computer to recognize over 100,000 cases than a physician may do 5,000 cases in their lifetime.
Right. And the other thing is, Jim, in the room, the other members assisting Jen also have the goggles on and can see the same thing that she's commanding to bring up in real time simultaneously. It really coordinates everybody being on the same page. So maybe tell a little bit more about that.
So Jen, when you're in there and you're manipulating the catheter, are you seeing that on the hologram or on fluoro or both, or what?
So you can look at it on whatever you choose to look at it. What we know, so we've now studied this, and what we've seen is that users in general have migrated away from fluoroscopy and towards their mapping systems. And those users who have the ability to use the SentiAR system seem to navigate to that pretty quickly. The reason being it's so intuitive. And it's easy to use when your hands are on a catheter, because we've worked really hard on making this interface really intuitive and easy to use. And right now it's a gaze-based interaction system, which means that with slight head movements, you can control what you're seeing and how you're seeing it. So it really allows your hands to be free and on the catheter.
That's amazing.
Now, is this technology going to be ready for other clinical uses? Let's start in cardiology first. and other things that you're obviously have thought about or thinking about. Any thoughts?
So
Thoughts. So
yeah, yes, I do. So the curse of being a startup and the benefit really is you have to focus to get things done and provide as much value as you can to your customer before you expand. So we are disciplined in saying no to a million things come our way right now. Every few weeks we get a request. Can you apply it to this? Can you apply it to that? Can you do oncology? How about women's health? How about brain surgeries? How about neurology? Within cardiology, people ask, how about structural heart? Can we do some planning?
Yeah.
Valve replacements? How about left appendage closure? Can we do something about that? So the truth is, wherever there is data that needs to be organized and turn into information, and wherever the physician needs to control that, there's opportunity for a technology like ours. So
are you guys really the first or among the very first for this data management approach? I mean, virtual reality, I read an article just the other day about the surgeons using virtual reality to plan kidney tumor surgery and having an effect on procedure time, supposedly, and blood loss,
right.
Decrease in blood loss and that. And so
planning, that's a great question.
But that for those guys is just looking at an image that's created before they go into the patient. But you guys are talking about a whole strata or two higher than that. Is that what I'm sensing?
Yeah, so we're in the procedure. So while the physician is operating, they're using the data in real time. Planning has been a very rich, crowded field. There's a lot of players there trying to solve problems and help physicians and fellows learn faster, or physicians plan more effectively. So where we are, especially in electrophysiology, we're the only one. And that, hopefully, if we do our job right, that's going to change. We expect people to want to do.
How about Jen? Do you have some examples of how it's changed? Are there examples of like changing procedure time? Obviously, it's decreased radiation, it sounds like. And has it given you a greater success rate in the ablation type procedures you do, and less reoccurrence because you're really seeing the anatomy in a better fashion?
I think those are all really good questions and all good endpoints for clinical studies. So we have now just wrapped up our first clinical study using the system, and that those data, the details of those data are embargoed. We're going to be presenting that in the next couple of weeks in Thailand at Asia Pacific Heart Rhythm Society, HRS. What do we know though? We learned some really important things very, very quickly. And to summarize at a high level, what were they? Number one, people were more accurate in navigating to places when they navigated with 3 dimensions. Now that seems like it should make sense, right? It just seems like, well, of course that should be. But this was the first time that we could say that and now have data to support that. And the improvement in accuracy was profound. So we're really excited about that. It begs the questions that you just asked. Is it going to lead to a better outcome for the patient? Because that is, of course, the ultimate goal.
Right.
And my scientific answer to you is, I have to study that. Again, it does seem to make sense, right? The pieces are now building on top of each other, leading us to the path that should eventually end in my patients do better for this. The question is, if you ask me, is every brick already there? Not quite, and we're putting those bricks together. But the early bricks fell into place a whole lot faster than we thought they would.
That is amazing. How about, obviously you've been working with this for a while, and I'm sure there must be a learning curve. You think it's going to be, as this expands to other EP docs or other types of cath lab jocks that they'll be able to do this kind of thing? I mean, I'm an old dog, but
Well,
people are smarter than I. But I got to imagine there's going to be an interesting learning curve. But of course, you're dealing with virtual reality, so you'll have some sort of virtual reality learning center or something, I guess.
Well, so I think what you bring up is a really good point. And we were very curious as to what the physician learning curve was going to be like. And it's hard for me to gauge that, right? Because I'm so immersed in it. And so we did a lot of human factors work with this. And when we did our clinical study, for obvious reasons, I could not participate in that. But what we saw, interestingly, we intentionally targeted physicians with a wide range of experience, right? So people who were just out of fellowship to people who've been doing this for 20 plus years. And we were intentional about that for exactly the reasons that you've mentioned. And what we found is that the learning curve is on average 15 to 20 minutes until people feel comfortable using the system.
Wow.
Well, so we worked really hard to make sure it was intuitive and easy to use, right? So we've spent, I think since the last time Jerry saw it, we've spent another year making sure that it was so easy that, my
this is AR for dummies, right? They're got a guidebook.
I mean, we're no.
All right, brother.
But we want people.
Jerry. Sorry, Jerry. I used to beat him up when we were little, but it's okay.
But we wanted it to be seamless. We wanted it to integrate into the workflow in such a way that the physicians only felt that it was adding value. So learning a whole new system again, that's tedious and tiresome. And I'm even at the point in my career where I'm quite tied to the things that I like. But if you make it easy, and if I can learn it in a few minutes, there's going to be good adaptability and of that kind of a technology. And then the other thing, as Berk mentioned, is that EP is a pretty technically savvy group. It's a technically advanced field. It's a young field. There's a lot of development that happens in very short periods of time. And so it's kind of interesting because we're sort of a group that likes taking on new technologies and tinkering with it. And so in a lot of ways, this is probably the best group in the world to start with. I imagine the interventional cath docs are next.
Well, so the thing about, to add to Jen's comment, the population EPs treat, particularly for cardiac arrhythmias, is so massive. It's a global epidemic today, the arrhythmia that we deal with as a population. You may have heard the stats on it, but it's over 33 million people estimated globally who has a cardiac arrhythmia. And the only curative solution today is to do an ablation. Maybe you do something with the left atrial appendage, but there is no other curative option. Drugs only help you maintain symptom-free for some patients. And some of the drugs we take aren't very good on your system. That's the
a lot of nasty side effects with some of those things.
Right, GI bleeds and things.
So, as you were talking, and Jen, as far as the population you deal with the younger people and kids, are there situations, I guess, of congenital heart anomalies that obviously make it much more difficult than the average adult? And I can envision that this hologram stuff in a younger person with a really weird heart could make a huge difference in success.
Yeah, so that's absolutely right. And what's been a really fun part of this journey is talking to my peers and hearing how they want to use a technology like this. So you're right, the group of patients that I'm going to use this in is different than what my peers might use it in. But what's nice is the technology is able to accommodate whatever we want from it. And that's been also a very intentional part of the design process.
So let me ask, what is on the horizon for SentiAR, and has this been embraced and adopted globally as well? As you say, you're presenting shortly.
So Jen, as Jen leaned back, as soon as you talked about market adoption, Jen is like, hey, I talked about the clinical usage. I hired Berk to do this.
All right, earn your money, fella.
That's right. That's right. So for adoption-wise, it's actually quite simple where we are. We're just about to submit here in the next couple of weeks for FDA clearance. This will be a 510K path. We've had several meetings with FDA to prepare our submission, so we have a well-defined path. We anticipate clearance to come Q1 of next year, so say March, April timeframe in 2020. And then from there is the adoption of any early technology. We will start with several clinical studies we have to run to continue to validate the technology, find the right use cases for it where it's the most impactful. You've already brought up Dr. Dwyer about potential for congenital, for example.
Which Dr. Dwyer, the good-looking one or the
Funny one.
Great radio voice.
the one that was on the call from the start.
Is it lub or dub?
Right.
Yeah, we're still working on that.
Yeah.
We need to figure that out. That's right. Yeah, so we're close. It's not globally adopted as we can't sell today. And, you know, the industry has changed a little bit. It used to be that you went to the European market right away through a CE mark process versus go to the US market. And FDA has come around 180 on partnering with new technology in an industry. So they've made it very appealing to come to the US first. And they've been very helpful in providing the right path and providing some guidance on how you get there. So it's become a bit of a partnership to get new technology out to US. So we've chosen to go to the US first, and then we'll follow up with the CE mark as well in the next couple of years. And then expansion of what we bring to the physician. Additional connectivity, incorporating other pieces of information, like incorporating electrograms or blood pressure, other things that are in the room. And following from that, bringing clinical decision support is our optimum, what we believe is the command center's future for something like this, where we call SentiAR the wearable command center in the operating room, where a physician can get help.
Yeah, I can imagine other types of companies, and I'm not an engineer, so maybe this is way too far-fetched, but, you know, robotically guided, electromagnetically guided catheters, and Jen pointing on the screen in front of her, the hologram in front of her, you know, go there. And that's
right.
Just amazing to think about that future too.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right. That's what we imagine is an intuitive way to interact with all the machines around you. And that's why we call it the command center, is creating an unprecedented way, and in some ways, a way we can't even imagine today, where a physician is connected to the machines in the virtual world, getting feedback, decision support, intuitive interaction, and ultimately bettering the care we give.
It almost sounds like an episode of Star Trek. When I was
we like to think it's not that far-fetched, right? It's not that far.
It's not. It's here, it's coming, and
that's
right. Why it's so exciting for my brother and myself to have you both on Card Talk today. So, Jim,
I'm impressed as you told me. I was impressed as you told me before we ever did this how brilliant Jen and Berk and John, and I guess, is it Michael who's one of the other guys with your company, Michael Southworth?
Yep.
And is he a relative of Southworth, who is the cardiologist in St. Louis at one point, or not?
He is not.
He's not. So a different Southworth family.
He is a transplant into St. Louis.
I remember that cardiologist because I think he was a professional baseball player before he went into cardiology. If I remember right.
Fascinating.
But, maybe I dreamed that, but yeah, this is
I think you're right, Jim.
amazing. But gosh, sharing your time and your brilliance with us has been just great, and I hope a lot of people get to listen to this. Any Jen and Berk, you have any final comments or special words for any other associates or family ending the program here?
Go ahead, Jen. I feel like I shouldn't follow you. It's just bad idea. But go ahead anyway.
I guess we're excited to see where this goes. And I think that in the next few years, we're going to have data that's going to support some of those questions, those smart questions that you were asking about, which is how do we improve our patient outcomes? And so hopefully we can do this again in another couple of years, and that path will be further built, and we'll be able to give you more information on that.
Excellent.
It's so exciting, and good luck over the next few months and years. But we'll be looking forward to hearing and reading and learning from a great group here, especially at St. Louis Children's Hospital here in St. Louis, so and across the country and across the world. So that wraps it up for younger brother Jim.
All right. Well, I guess that's it for the Dwyer brothers and MD Edge Card Talk. And thanks again, Jennifer and Berk, for joining us today. And I want to thank our audience for listening. Remember, you can find CardioCast via Amazon Alexa, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you like what you hear, please leave us a rating or review. For MD Edge, I'm Dr. Jim Dwyer.